So good evening. I came back online here faster than I thought I would. And the reason for this being is the exhibition in Moscow of the conquered enemy vehicles and tanks and that sort of stuff. And earlier today, some YouTubers in Russia, some of them non-Russians and some of them Russians, started posting the videos of all these different tanks and armored vehicles and mortars and, the wide variety of the stuff. And the Bushmaster, I think, the Australian one. So now we have to remember one thing. The only reason that these military vehicles are in Moscow now on show is because Russia invaded the Ukraine a little bit over 2 years ago. Otherwise, we would not be seeing these vehicles in Moscow. And that's it. That's basically what it is. Now, the exhibition itself has basically now exposed the Russian side. They probably waited out of whether they're going to display those or not. But for people like me who work in the defense sector, this has given me an unbelievable opportunity to study these vehicles, especially since there's so many videos being posted now in high resolution and in HD. So you can pretty well inspect each vehicle. And the vehicle with the most damage is the vehicle from Australia, the Bushmaster, I believe it is called. And that was targeted by an incendiary bomb, basically. From the way what it looks like, it is that this bomb was targeted next to the vehicle. And these bombs, there's a wide variety of them, but some of them, they produce a fireball, a very extreme heat fireball around 1,000 degrees Celsius or higher. And that fireball spreads out to about 100 meter radius. It goes quite a bit. It will literally incinerate everything in that radius, whether it is trees. It will go 1 to 2 meters into the ground. Basically, any mouse, any worm, any kind of creature living in the ground is dead, basically incinerated. And it literally melts the paint off the vehicle. So you see only the bare metal. And from that heat, all of the armored windows, no matter how thick they are, they just blow out. The soldiers who are exposed to this inside the vehicle usually suffer almost an instantaneous heat stroke, a heat shock from that intense heat. Death occurs within seconds to minutes, depending on how they're exposed and how hot this gets. And I have seen, unfortunately, several pictures from the war zone, from both sides, from the Ukrainian sides and from the Russian sides, when they were using these type of bombs or ammunitions, of the deceased soldiers on what they look like and that sort of stuff. It is not a pretty picture, and I don't want to get further into this. I have not seen any pictures out of the war zone lately, I would say within the last 6 to 8 months, which have shown the use of this, which means this Bushmaster they displayed there was probably hit over a year ago. So they had that for a while. This is not something recent. Interestingly enough, they placed that first, I guess, because it is some sign of power, or I mean, the destruction is just unbelievable in it, and that created, I guess, some comfort for the Russian people there to see this. I personally, as a Russian, would not have done this, and like I said, this goes back to the ability for us to thoroughly evaluate the capabilities of the Russian military. And I mean, the incendiary bombs and ammunitions is nothing new. What was more interesting actually were the other vehicles, which were not as heavily damaged from various countries. I can't remember now all the classifications, but the Russians understand exactly on how to target, for instance, the Humvees, the 998s, which have a heavily armored windows. They are several inches thick and they're very difficult to penetrate. And they were beefed up during the Iraq War and Afghanistan wars after 9/11. They were specifically developed. And it seems like it that for many years now, the Russians have evaluated these American or NATO vehicles to begin with, since we are basically their number one enemy, for capabilities in weapons development of what they needed, and they came up with just the right ammunition. And it looks like it on that one Humvee, the 998 they portrayed. You can clearly see they took out the driver first. This is a machine gun, and it is anything larger than 25 millimeters, probably 30 millimeter, 50 millimeter rounds. And they're able to penetrate several layers of armored glass, of special glass, which is highly classified. So this is something they had to develop well in advance. This is not something you start when you hear, oh, we're going to have Humvees, 998s coming into the battlefield. We better start developing something now. This is a pretty long and worn-out process to find the right combination there for these kind of ammunitions. So my guess would be that the ammunition, the anti-Humvee 998 ammunition from Russia, was developed already in the 2000s. And this was, of course, the time period where they were helping us, so to speak, in combating the Islam terrorists over there with Osama bin Laden and all of this stuff. And of course, the Democrats got really excited when Obama got elected, and then we had all this transparency coming out and this, that, and the other thing. And they were able to develop this. So when the Western world announced that they were sending these vehicles or that vehicle or the other vehicle, the Russians had already the appropriate anti-weapons arsenal at hand for those vehicles. They hadn't had a chance probably yet to prove it that they work, but they had them. And now we have seen the effectiveness of them. Not only did they know what weapons or munition they needed, they also knew on how to target and where to target these vehicles. The Marder, for instance, was taken out on the site. The one of the Abrams tanks, I believe it was, they had taken out the front wheel, not the very first one, but the first on the undercarriage, which is one of the driving wheels, and disabled the vehicle that way with the chain coming off. They did this on several vehicles. They did not even bother trying to pierce the ammunition or the armament in the front or rear. The other thing is there were several of the tank vehicles which have a turret, with a turret opening for a commander, for instance, to come out or, take position, which is one of the weak spots on any tank, always has been. And it looks like it that they have developed also the correct ammunition to pierce those from the top down, either through drone warfare, which is fairly new compared to what we had, or from aircraft, as helicopter or, jet, fighter jet, something like this. But probably more so the drones and the suicide drones they have. They have definitely gotten into that pretty easily. So there was already a plan on the Russian side, a strategy on how to combat NATO vehicles. They were able now to fine tune this, so they know now what they can do and what they cannot do. And we can evaluate this now thanks to all the YouTube videos of what this actually did do or didn't do and how they affected this. Interestingly enough, there are several tanks, for instance, and other vehicles which appeared completely undamaged, like the German 2A6 tank. They had the Leopard 2A6, the newest one, was almost in pristine condition. You can see this on the wheels and on the chains. That's usually where they attacked them. On both sides, there was no damage. Maybe a few stray bullets have hit it, but nothing in particular. And I believe that this was part of the 47th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian army, because they had to retreat when the Russians were breaking through. That was about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I believe it was. And that was that last tank they had rushed basically to Moscow for this exhibition. So that was kind of the price, but the reason why they got the Leopard tank was not because they destroyed it, but the Ukrainians had to abandon the vehicles, and there's several other ones. Basically, when you watch these videos and you have a almost completely intact vehicle there, where you can't see any physical damage, and if you have a shot good enough where you can see the turret, then you will be able to see this. If the turret is okay and the chains are okay and there's nothing else there, then you know that these vehicles were abandoned. That is further confirmed, this observation, by the tents they have set up with all the left behind radio equipment, communications equipment, and stuff like this, because the Ukrainians abandoned everything when they retreated. That is something you have to do now and then in certain situations to preserve your soldiers, to preserve human life. And they were already pretty decimated, like I said in my other video 2 days ago, by like 50%, that they had probably no other option. Normally, if the time permits, you would try to destroy your own equipment before you retreat. But if there's no time, if you have to get out, you have to get out, you leave it behind. That has been true in every war, and every side had to do this at one point or another. We, on the other hand, also have shut down or destroyed several Russian tanks of a wide variety and flavor, including their latest one they have. I forgot what you call that thing. They were also hit and taken out in a similar way. So we understand now what they have pretty much in detail, what their capabilities are, and our defense industry here can now reevaluate and readjust our system, our weapons, to put the Russians back behind on it. And if we go back to a certain situation what we had during the Cold War, the espionage, one side spying on the other, trying to find out these secrets, was by far more difficult when everything was divided and we had the Iron Curtain. So the information was getting into the Soviet Union, but by far less, because this is ways too open for this kind of stuff. And it was ways too easy for Russia, to spy on the West. And probably somewhat similar, the situation was fairly easy for the West to spy in Russia. I'm sure there was several activities there going on. The interesting reaction of the public is, from what I observed in these videos, which were posted, is that Uh, the Moscow population who looked at it was somewhat shocked when they saw the flags and these things because they are not there yet. So this, I'm pretty sure that exhibition will result in a anti-European, anti-NATO attitude in those people who have not been fully on board yet. So it won't probably push everyone over, but this is already going in this direction. That will make it easier for Putin to implement the changes he wants to implement over there in Russia. There's no question about it. So it's going to get more difficult. I feel sorry for the Russian YouTubers who are trying to portray Russia as a beautiful country with their village life stories they got, mostly the girls. And yet here we come and the guys go out and they show all the conquered tanks, so to speak. So right the opposite. So here you got these two extremes crashing together. This will rattle the YouTube community through pretty well too. Like I said, I'm trying to maintain neutrality in this as good as I can. One thing I observed in one of the videos is the Ukrainians also had a Austrian vehicle, a Pinzgau, and that surprised me because Austria is a neutral country, and I would have not expected to see any Austrian or Swiss military-related weapons. The Swiss, I did not see. Austrian, yes, the Pinzgau. So that came as a surprise. That truly came as a surprise to me that the Austrians had given that to the, at least what it appears to be, because they put the Austrian flag on there. The vehicle is made in Austria. If it necessarily was delivered by Austria to the Ukraine is a different story. But this is what is portrayed in this whole thing. It is a sad story. We had this thing with the Crocus City Hall where all these innocent people died. We got all these innocent people dying over there in the Ukraine. We got all these soldiers dying in the Ukraine and the Russians on both sides. It is, this whole thing is a mess. This is one heck of a mess. And we will have to see now on how they gonna work this through. And like I said, is if the Ukraine is going to be able to target goals in Russia, infrastructure type of goals, and Russian civilians are going to get killed, that's what's going to drive then the public opinion against the Ukraine, even more so in NATO, Europe. And this is gonna be with us for a long time to come. I don't want to, not to jeopardize any other YouTuber here, so I will refrain from saying any nationality or their names or channels, because just for protection, because this is going to be a hot contested field here in a lot of ways, and there is institutions watching this, looking through this, observing this, what we do here on YouTube, and this can have quite some consequences, and these consequences are going to get more severe. So that's why I'm very, very careful. I also will no longer comment or give my thumbs up, my obligatory 3 thumbs or 3 hearts, whatever, on any other channel at this point, if it is in the Ukraine or in Russia. Just for those reasons, not to implicate anyone else or possibly get them into hot water. It has really gotten to the situation here where we have to be ultra careful with this. I hope only we're going to have some form of peace here sooner than later. At the moment, it doesn't look like it. But these are the lessons learned. It is an unbelievable tragedy that we, after World War II and the Vietnam War and the Korean War and the entire Iraq and war in Afghanistan and all of the stuff, that we have gotten now into this kind of a warfare over there in the Ukraine about some territory. It is just unbelievable. The original explanation of the Russian government was that they had to invade this. The justification was the Nazification of the Ukraine. Now, I've never heard of any place in the Ukraine which had anything to do with the Order of the Teutonic Knights, the Deutsch Order, or of their Viking Germania heritage they have or the Catholic, because the Order of the Teutonic Knights was or is a Catholic order. And the Ukrainian people have been, since the beginning of their Christianity or their conversion to Christianity, Orthodox, which is closely related to the Greek Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church. These are Orthodox Church. And then you had Jewish people there, and probably pagans to a certain extent. This has never been part of the Holy Roman Empire, or anything could link this to the roots of Nazism. This is about as far removed as it could be, this whole thing. If anyone in the Ukraine thinks that they have any of that in their blood, I doubt it, at least not that I know of. I'm not aware of any of this stuff, so for me this was just never a question. Well, anyway, I wish everyone a good evening, and I hope we're going to have peace here sooner than later. You have a good night.